The fastest way to lose a good man is to make him feel invisible. I didn't know those words would become the epitaph of my marriage until the night my wife decided to say something that turned an entire ballroom against me. The chandelier light shimmered across crystal glasses and polished marble floors as more than 300 executives filled the Grand Regency Ballroom in downtown Chicago. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays of champagne, while a jazz quartet played softly near the stage. It was Atlas Global's annual leadership gala, the kind of event where promotions were announced, careers were made, and reputations were carefully polished beneath expensive suits and practiced smiles. My wife, Amanda Brooks, belonged here. At least that's what everyone believed. She stood near the center of the room in a navy evening gown, laughing with senior executives, looking every bit like the rising star the company magazine had featured just 2 months earlier. People gravitated toward her naturally. She had that effect on rooms. Confidence, charm, ambition. The kind of qualities corporations reward. I stood 20 feet away near a marble column, nursing a glass of bourbon and watching the crowd move around her like water around a stone. Most of them barely noticed me. The few who did offered polite nods before returning their attention to people they considered important. That wasn't new. I'd spent years letting people underestimate me. Usually, it didn't bother me. Tonight was different. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs earlier. The way Amanda introduced me less often. The way she rolled her eyes when someone asked what I did. The way she seemed embarrassed by my presence whenever her colleagues were around. Little things. Small cuts. Harmless on their own. Dangerous when stacked together. But marriages don't collapse all at once. They erode quietly, one ignored warning at a time. A burst of laughter pulled my attention back toward the center of the room. Amanda had joined a group surrounding Michael Dawson, one of the company's senior vice presidents. Michael was the kind of man who never entered a room without announcing himself. Expensive watch. Perfect haircut. The confidence of someone who believed success made him interesting. He raised his champagne glass while speaking loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. More people began turning toward him, toward Amanda, toward whatever show was about to begin. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. Sometimes you know a storm is coming before the first drop of rain falls. Michael smiled broadly. Amanda, he said, you've had the biggest year of anyone here. Promotion, bonuses, leadership awards. Be honest. What's your secret? More laughter. Amanda smiled. The polished corporate smile she had perfected over the years. Michael pointed across the room. Pointed directly at me. Maybe it's because your husband stays out of the way and lets you shine. Several people chuckled. Amanda laughed too. The sound carried farther than it should have. Michael continued. Seriously, what's his role these days? More eyes turned toward me. More smiles. More curiosity. I remained still. Amanda lifted her wine glass and glanced in my direction. For a brief second, our eyes met. There was a time when she would have defended me without hesitation. A time when respect came naturally between us. That version of Amanda felt very far away. Then she said it. Calmly. Casually. Like she was commenting on the weather. He's only here because my invitation allowed a +1. The room exploded with laughter. Not cruel laughter. Not angry laughter. Something worse. Comfortable laughter. The kind people share when they believe everyone understands the joke. Every face around her lit up. Every smile widened. And Amanda laughed with them. Loudest of all, the bourbon suddenly tasted bitter. Around me, conversations resumed. Music continued. Glasses clinked. The ballroom carried on as if nothing important had happened. Maybe to them, it hadn't. To them, it was just a joke. A harmless comment. A funny moment at an expensive event. But something shifted inside me. Not rage. Not humiliation. Something colder. More permanent. I looked at Amanda across the crowded ballroom and realized I no longer recognized the woman smiling beneath those crystal lights. The woman I married would never have said those words. The woman standing there now had no idea what she had just set in motion. And neither did anyone else in that room. The strange thing about public humiliation is that it does not always hurt the way people expect. Standing there in that ballroom, watching conversations slowly return to normal, I was not angry. Anger is loud. Anger demands attention. What settled over me was quieter than that. It felt like clarity. I took a slow sip of bourbon and let the noise of the room wash around me. The laughter was already fading into the background, replaced by discussions about quarterly reports, expansion plans, and executive bonuses. To everyone else, the moment was over. To me, it was the beginning of something. Amanda remained surrounded by colleagues near the center of the ballroom. Every few seconds, someone congratulated her on another accomplishment, another promotion, another milestone. She smiled graciously, accepting every compliment as though she had been preparing for this night her entire life. Maybe she had. Looking back, I realized the woman standing beneath those chandeliers had been drifting away for years. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like a shoreline disappearing beneath rising water. There was a time when Amanda and I shared a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store on the north side of Chicago. The radiator rattled all winter. The windows leaked cold air whenever the wind came off Lake Michigan. We ate takeout on folding chairs because we could not afford proper furniture. Those were not glamorous years, but they were honest ones. We built dreams together back then. We celebrated every small victory, every promotion, every paycheck increase. Every step forward felt shared. Somewhere along the way, success changed the equation. Or maybe success simply revealed what had always been there beneath the surface. I watched Amanda laugh at something Michael Dawson said and wondered when she stopped seeing me as a partner. When did I become an accessory? When did I become someone she tolerated instead of respected? The answer did not arrive all at once. It surfaced through memories. A dinner 6 months earlier where she introduced me only by my first name. A corporate retreat where she spent 3 days pretending she had arrived alone. The subtle corrections whenever someone assumed I had a meaningful career. The jokes. The dismissive comments. The little signs I convinced myself were temporary. Marriage teaches you how to explain away things you do not want to face. I set my empty glass on a nearby table and adjusted my jacket. Across the room, Amanda finally noticed me again. Her smile faltered for half a second. Perhaps she expected me to leave. Perhaps she expected an argument later. Perhaps she expected nothing at all. That was the problem. She no longer knew me. Most people in that ballroom did not know me either. They saw a middle-aged husband standing alone near a column while his successful wife entertained executives. They filled in the blanks themselves. Human beings are remarkably efficient storytellers. Give them a few details, and they will invent the rest. The unemployed husband. The dependent spouse. The man living in someone else's shadow. It was a convenient story. Easy to understand. Easy to believe. The truth was far less obvious. 15 years earlier, I had made a decision that confused almost everyone around me. A decision that allowed me to disappear while something much larger continued growing without me. Very few people understood why I walked away when I did. Fewer still knew what remained behind. That anonymity had served me well. It gave me freedom. It gave me privacy. Tonight it had given everyone permission to underestimate me. The realization almost made me smile. Across the ballroom, Amanda lifted her wine glass during a toast. The crowd joined her. Crystal chimed beneath golden light. Applause echoed through the room. For a moment, she looked exactly like someone standing on top of the world. What she could not see was how fragile appearances really are. A reputation can take decades to build and a single day to unravel. I glanced toward the stage where senior leadership would soon gather for speeches. Several familiar faces stood near the curtains. Faces that recognized me immediately. Faces that carefully avoided showing it. That interested me. Very few coincidences survive close inspection. And lately, I had begun noticing far too many things that did not quite add up. As the applause faded, one thought settled firmly into place. Amanda believed tonight proved how little I mattered. By this time tomorrow, everyone in that ballroom would understand how wrong that assumption was. The speeches began shortly after 9 o'clock. Senior executives rotated across the stage beneath bright white spotlights, while applause rose and fell in carefully measured waves. I listened without really hearing the words. Revenue growth, strategic initiatives, market expansion, the same language that filled boardrooms across America every day. Most people heard confidence in those presentations. I heard something else. Tiny inconsistencies. Numbers that sounded polished, but somehow incomplete. Claims that felt rehearsed rather than earned. The feeling had been growing for months. Tonight only sharpened it. I stood near the back of the ballroom while guests focused on the stage. That was when my phone vibrated. One message. No greeting. No signature. Just 6 words. They know you attended tonight. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I locked it and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Most people would have found the message strange. I found it expected, because the truth was, the concerns that had brought me to this event had nothing to do with Amanda. Long before tonight's humiliation, long before the jokes and laughter, questions had already begun forming beneath the surface. Questions about contracts, financial reports, executive decisions. Questions that refused to disappear, no matter how many reassuring answers I received. Looking back, the warning signs had started almost a year earlier. An unusual acquisition approved despite weak projections. Vendor relationships that seemed oddly protected from scrutiny. Performance reports that looked impressive until you examined the details. Individually, none of it proved anything. Together, they painted a picture that made me uncomfortable. So I did what I had always done when something felt wrong. I paid attention. Quietly, carefully, patiently. The stage lights reflected across hundreds of glasses as another executive finished speaking. Applause followed. Amanda joined the standing ovation with everyone else. She looked completely at ease. Successful. Admired. Certain of her future. There was a time when seeing her happy would have been enough for me. That time felt increasingly distant. The next speaker was Chief Executive Officer Daniel Mercer. Tall. Charismatic. The kind of leader investors loved. He walked onto the stage with effortless confidence and immediately captured the room. People leaned forward. Cameras appeared. Phones rose into the air. Daniel smiled and began discussing the company's extraordinary momentum. Growth. Opportunity. Vision. The audience responded exactly as expected. Yet while everyone else focused on his words, I focused on his eyes. Experienced executives learned to watch details. Tiny reactions. Brief moments when a carefully constructed image slips. Daniel's gaze moved across the audience several times. Then it found me. Just for a second. Less than a second. But it happened. The smile never left his face. The presentation never faltered. Yet something changed. A flash of recognition. A flash of concern. Then it was gone. Most people would never have noticed. I did. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown number. He is nervous. I did not respond. Across the room, Amanda was completely focused on the stage. She had no idea what was happening. Neither did Michael Dawson or the executives surrounding him. They believed tonight was a celebration. They believed tomorrow would look exactly like today. Success often creates that illusion. People start believing momentum is permanent, that consequences belong to someone else. The speech ended to thunderous applause. Daniel stepped away from the podium and disappeared behind the curtain. Within moments, the room returned to networking, drinks, and conversation. I glanced toward the side exit near the stage. A man in a gray suit stood there watching me. Not security, not hotel staff, someone else. The moment our eyes met, he nodded once and disappeared into the hallway. Calmly, deliberately, like someone delivering a message without speaking. My pulse remained steady. If anything, I felt calmer than I had all evening. Because for the first time in months, pieces were beginning to move. Amanda laughed again somewhere behind me. Michael was telling another story. Glasses clinked. Music drifted through the ballroom. Everything looked normal. That was the dangerous part. Major collapses rarely announced themselves. They arrived disguised as ordinary days. I checked the time. 9:43. Then I looked toward the hallway where the man had vanished. Something important was waiting on the other side of that door. And deep down, I already knew that once I stepped through it, there would be no turning back. I waited exactly 3 minutes before leaving the ballroom. Not because I was uncertain, because experience had taught me that timing matters. People reveal more when they believe the audience has stopped watching. The hallway outside felt noticeably quieter than the celebration behind me. Thick carpet absorbed footsteps. Soft wall sconces cast warm pools of light across framed photographs of Chicago skylines. Somewhere in the distance, an elevator chimed. The man in the gray suit was waiting near a set of conference room doors. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply turned and walked away, confident I would follow. I did. Some decisions are made long before the moment arrives. The conference room itself was small compared to the ballroom. A polished walnut table, 12 leather chairs, a pitcher of water. Nothing remarkable, except for the woman sitting alone at the far end. She appeared to be in her early 40s. Dark blazer, reading glasses, a laptop already open in front of her. She looked less like a corporate executive and more like someone who preferred facts over opinions. Those are usually the people worth listening to. She stood when I entered. Mr. Brooks, she said quietly. Thank you for coming. I nodded once. You asked for this meeting. Her expression tightened slightly. Not nervous. Careful. Actually, I have been trying to arrange this meeting for 7 months. That caught my attention. 7 months was a long time. Long enough for problems to grow roots. She slid a folder across the table. The paper was thick, expensive, organized. The kind of folder prepared by professionals who expected scrutiny. I remained standing for several seconds before opening it. Numbers, reports, internal audits, procurement records, vendor agreements. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Then I noticed the pattern. Small discrepancies repeated across multiple divisions. Transactions structured just below reporting thresholds. Consulting contracts awarded to newly formed firms. Expenses distributed carefully enough to avoid immediate detection. Individually, each item could be explained. Together, they formed something far more troubling. I slowly turned another page. Then another. The room felt colder. How many people know about this? I asked. The woman hesitated. Fewer than 10. And how many are involved? This time she took longer to answer. More than you would like. Silence settled between us. The kind of silence that arrives when facts become impossible to ignore. I looked back at the documents. Certain names appeared repeatedly. Senior managers, department heads, executives, people trusted with responsibility, people trusted with oversight. Then I reached a page that made me stop completely. Amanda's name, not at the center, not leading anything, but present. Several approvals, several signatures, several projects connected to individuals already under review. My eyes remained fixed on the page. For a moment, the sounds of the hotel seemed very far away. Are you certain? I asked. We verified everything twice. The woman removed her glasses and folded them carefully. That does not mean she understands the full picture, but her name appears too often to ignore. I leaned back slowly. Looking at a name on paper feels different than hearing a rumor. Paper does not care about emotions. Paper does not care about marriages. Paper simply records choices. Looking back, certain conversations suddenly made more sense. Amanda's growing obsession with promotions. Her loyalty to executives she barely knew 5 years earlier. Her habit of defending decisions she could not fully explain. At the time, I told myself it was ambition. Now I was not so sure. The woman closed the folder. There is something else. Those 4 words rarely bring good news. She turned the laptop toward me. An email chain filled the screen. Internal discussions. Strategy meetings. Executive communications. One particular thread carried Daniel Mercer's name. Several others appeared beneath it. Then I saw tomorrow's date. My attention sharpened immediately. The subject line contained only 2 words. Final approval. Whatever was happening, it was not months away. It was not next quarter. It was tomorrow. The woman met my eyes. That is why I needed you here tonight. Outside the conference room, faint applause echoed from the ballroom as another speech concluded. The celebration continued uninterrupted. Nobody out there realized a storm was already moving beneath the surface. I closed the laptop slowly. Tomorrow suddenly felt much closer than it had an hour ago. I left the conference room carrying the folder under my arm and a weight in my chest that felt heavier than paper should. The ballroom doors opened, and the noise returned immediately. Laughter, music, conversations about success and opportunity. It was remarkable how normal everything looked. Human beings are talented at celebrating while standing inches away from problems they cannot yet see. Amanda spotted me the moment I stepped back into the room. She excused herself from a group of executives and approached with a smile that looked polished enough for a corporate brochure. There you are, she said. I was wondering where you disappeared to. I studied her face for a moment. 15 years of marriage teaches you how to read small details. The slight tension around her eyes. The careful control in her voice. The assumption that she already knew the answer before asking the question. Just getting some air, I said. She nodded. Not because she believed me. Because she did not care enough to question it. That realization landed harder than I expected. There was a time when Amanda noticed everything about me. Back when we shared late-night conversations in tiny apartments and celebrated small victories over cheap takeout dinners. Somewhere between promotions and executive retreats, curiosity had been replaced by assumptions. She looked toward the stage where another presentation was beginning. Big day tomorrow, she said. A lot of important decisions. The words seemed harmless. Yet after what I had just seen, they carried a different meaning. Important for who? I asked. Amanda laughed softly. For everyone. Then she glanced at her watch. Daniel thinks this could be the beginning of something huge. Daniel. Not the chief executive officer. Not Mr. Mercer. Just Daniel. Familiar. Comfortable. Trusted. Another small detail. Another piece of a puzzle I was still assembling. She returned to her colleagues before I could respond. I remained where I was, watching the room through a completely different lens. Earlier that evening, I had seen executives enjoying a celebration. Now I saw clusters, alliances, patterns, certain people moving together, certain conversations ending when others approached. Once suspicion enters your mind, ordinary behavior starts revealing extraordinary things. Near the stage, Michael Dawson stood with 3 department heads whose names appeared repeatedly inside the folder. Across the ballroom, another executive laughed beside a consultant connected to one of the questionable contracts. Everywhere I looked, threads crossed paths. Not enough to prove anything. Enough to make me pay attention. The dangerous thing about hidden systems is that they begin to feel normal to the people inside them. After enough time, they stop seeing themselves as participants. They see themselves as survivors. The music shifted as servers carried fresh trays through the crowd. Champagne glasses sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Daniel Mercer reappeared near the front of the room and immediately became the center of attention. Investors approached him. Board members approached him. Amanda joined the circle a few moments later. She looked proud standing there. Certain, confident, like someone who believed she was standing on the winning side of history. Looking back, that was the moment I realized something important. Tonight was not an accident. The jokes, the dismissive comments, the public humiliation, none of it had been planned specifically for me. It happened because everyone in that room shared the same assumption. They believed I was irrelevant. Invisible people hear things. Invisible people notice things. Invisible people become dangerous when they stop caring about appearances. My phone vibrated one final time. Another message from the unknown number. Tomorrow begins at 8 sharp. Be ready. I deleted the message immediately. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked across the ballroom one last time. Amanda raised her glass during another toast. Michael laughed. Daniel smiled. The executives around them looked completely relaxed. They believed tomorrow would deliver promotions, contracts, and celebrations. They believed the future belonged to them. For the first time all night, I almost felt sorry for them. Because while they were busy celebrating what they thought they had built, they had no idea someone else had already started pulling at the foundation. And by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, the first cracks would become impossible to ignore. I slept less than 3 hours that night. Not because I was anxious. Anxiety comes from uncertainty. By the time I left the hotel, uncertainty had already been replaced by something else. Direction. The Chicago skyline was still wrapped in darkness when I pulled into the parking garage at 7:12 the next morning. A cold wind moved between the buildings, carrying the smell of rain and concrete. Above me, the glass tower that housed Atlas Global reflected the first hints of sunrise. Employees were already arriving, coffee cups in hand, laptop bags over shoulders. Normal people heading toward what they believed would be a normal workday. Looking back, that was the strange part. Entire futures can change while most people are still deciding what to order for breakfast. I entered through a side entrance and rode the elevator alone. 42 floors passed in silence. The folder rested on my lap. The same folder that had transformed a celebration into a countdown. When the doors opened, the executive floor felt unusually tense. Assistants moved quickly between offices. Phones rang more often than usual. Conversations stopped whenever someone else approached. It reminded me of a house settling before a storm. Nothing dramatic. Just small signs that pressure was building somewhere behind the walls. At 7:46, the first email arrived. Mandatory executive meeting. Attendance required. Conference room A. 8 o'clock sharp. No explanation. No agenda. Within minutes, phones across the floor lit up. Questions began spreading. Rumors followed immediately afterward. Some executives assumed a merger announcement was coming. Others believed new leadership appointments were being finalized. Several expected bonus allocations connected to the previous night's celebration. Nobody seemed worried. If anything, excitement filled the air. Success creates confidence. Sometimes too much confidence. Through the glass walls of a nearby office, I spotted Michael Dawson. He looked relaxed. He was laughing with two department heads whose names appeared repeatedly throughout the audit materials. One of them raised a coffee cup in a mock toast. Whatever they expected from the morning meeting, none of them appeared concerned. Amanda arrived shortly before 8. She walked through the executive floor carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the same confidence she had displayed all evening. Several co-workers congratulated her. She accepted every compliment with practiced grace. Then she saw me standing near a window overlooking the city. For a moment, surprise crossed her face. "Nathan," she asked, "what are you doing here?" The question hung between us. Not hostile, not warm, simply confused. From her perspective, I did not belong on this floor. I offered a small smile. "Just attending a meeting." She frowned slightly. "What meeting?" Before I could answer, another email notification sounded across multiple phones simultaneously. A revised subject line appeared beneath the original invitation. "Attendance required. Board oversight present." That changed everything. Conversations stopped immediately. Expressions tightened. Board oversight meetings were rare. Emergency board oversight meetings were almost unheard of. Amanda checked her phone twice before looking back at me. Something had shifted behind her eyes. Not fear. Awareness. The first realization that today might not follow the script she expected. At exactly 8 o'clock, the doors to conference room A opened. Executives began filing inside. Daniel Mercer entered first, smiling confidently, as always. Michael followed close behind. Department heads, vice presidents, legal advisors, financial officers. One by one, they took their seats around the long walnut table. Amanda hesitated near the doorway and glanced toward me again. I noticed she was no longer smiling. The room slowly filled until only a few chairs remained empty. Murmurs drifted across the table. Questions without answers. Assumptions without facts. Then the doors closed. Silence settled over the room. A silence so complete that every shifting chair seemed louder than it should have. Daniel looked toward the head of the table and frowned. One chair remained empty. The most important chair in the room. The seat reserved for whoever had called the meeting. Several people exchanged confused looks. Daniel checked his watch. Michael leaned back in his chair. Amanda folded her hands together. Nobody understood why they had been summoned. Nobody understood who was about to walk through that door. Then the handle turned, and every conversation died instantly. The door opened slowly. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. Just a quiet movement that immediately captured every eye in the room. Two members of the board entered first, followed by the woman from the conference room the night before. Several executives straightened in their seats. Daniel Mercer frowned. Michael Dawson exchanged a confused glance with the department head beside him. Then I walked in. At first, nobody reacted. Why would they? To most of the people around that table, I was still Amanda's husband. The man from the gala. The invisible +1. The outsider who did not belong in executive meetings. I could almost see the questions forming behind their eyes. Amanda's confusion was the most obvious. She looked from me to the board members and then back again. "Nathan?" she asked quietly. Nobody answered her. I walked the length of the conference room at an unhurried pace. Every footstep echoed against polished wood and glass. The empty chair at the head of the table waited beneath the large company logo mounted on the wall. For years, I had avoided that seat. For years, I had preferred distance over visibility, privacy over recognition, simplicity over status. Looking back, perhaps that had been a mistake. Because people eventually stop respecting what they cannot see. I reached the chair and placed the folder on the table. Silence deepened. Daniel finally spoke. "I am sorry," he said with a polite smile. "There seems to be some confusion." His confidence sounded genuine. He still believed he understood the situation. "No confusion," one of the board members replied. "Please sit down, Daniel." The smile disappeared. Not completely, just enough. The room grew noticeably colder. I lowered myself into the chair at the head of the table. Around me, executives exchanged uncertain looks. Michael shifted in his seat. Amanda stared openly now. The board member nearest the projector picked up a remote and activated the large screen mounted on the wall. The first slide appeared. Corporate ownership structure. Several people frowned immediately. Others leaned forward. Daniel's jaw tightened. Names, trusts, holding entities, and governance agreements filled the screen. Most people would have found it painfully boring. To those familiar with corporate control, It was devastatingly clear. The board member began speaking. Calm, precise, professional. He explained how Atlas Global had originally been structured, how ownership had been protected through a layered trust arrangement, how voting authority remained intact despite operational leadership changing over the years. Then he reached the final slide. One name appeared alone beneath the ownership chart. Nathan Brooks. The room went completely silent. Not meeting room silence. Not professional silence. Shock. Genuine shock. Amanda blinked twice as if her eyes were struggling to process what they were seeing. Michael looked from the screen to me and back again. Daniel remained perfectly still. That reaction interested me most. Because unlike the others, Daniel understood exactly what the slide meant. The board member continued. Mr. Brooks founded Atlas Global 17 years ago. Through the governing trust structure, he remains controlling owner and retains ultimate authority under specific oversight provisions. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words settled over the room like concrete. Looking back, it almost felt unfair. They had spent years constructing assumptions. One slide destroyed all of them. Amanda's face had gone pale. Nathan, she whispered. It was the same name she had spoken hundreds of times before. Yet now it sounded unfamiliar, like she was saying it for the first time. Michael leaned forward. That cannot be right. His voice cracked slightly. Everyone knows Daniel built this company. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, just long enough to reveal the truth. He knew. He had always known. The board member calmly opened another document. Original incorporation records appeared on the screen. Then early funding agreements. Then signatures. Dates. Legal filings. Facts do not care about opinions. Facts simply exist. One by one, every remaining doubt disappeared. Nobody laughed now. Nobody looked amused. Nobody treated me like an outsider. The room had finally realized something important. The man they dismissed the night before had never been outside the company. He had been above it. I folded my hands together and looked around the table. Some faces showed disbelief. Others showed fear. Amanda looked heartbroken. Daniel looked trapped. Michael looked like a man replaying every conversation he wished he could take back. And the meeting had not even reached the difficult part yet. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The projector continued glowing against the wall while the truth settled over the room. Then the board chair cleared his throat and broke the silence. Now that ownership has been clarified, he said calmly, we can address the reason this meeting was called. Another slide appeared on the screen. Audit review. The title looked harmless, almost boring. Yet I watched several faces around the table change immediately. Daniel Mercer sat perfectly still. Michael Dawson shifted in his chair. Two department heads exchanged quick glances before looking away. Small reactions. Tiny cracks. The board chair opened the report and began moving through the findings one section at a time. Vendor contracts. Consulting agreements. Procurement approvals. Revenue projections. None of it sounded dramatic. There were no raised voices. No accusations. Just facts presented in careful sequence. The most dangerous kind of truth is usually the quiet kind. Every page added another layer. Every chart revealed another inconsistency. Every document connected another piece of the puzzle. The room grew quieter with each slide. Questions turned into explanations. Explanations turned into contradictions. Contradictions turned into silence. Looking back, what surprised me most was how ordinary it all appeared. People imagine major corporate failures as dramatic events. In reality, they often begin with small decisions repeated over time. One approval, one exception, one shortcut, then another, and another, until nobody remembers where the line originally stood. Daniel attempted to intervene twice. The board listened politely both times. Then another document appeared on the screen. Then another. Eventually, even he stopped speaking. The evidence did not need help making its case. Across the table, Amanda stared at the reports as if she were seeing them for the first time. Maybe she was. Her name appeared several times. Not as an architect, not as a leader, as a participant. Signatures, authorizations, recommendations. The kind of involvement that becomes dangerous when nobody asks enough questions. I watched her shoulders slowly lose their confidence. The ambitious executive from the ballroom was disappearing. In her place sat someone confronting consequences she never expected to face. The board chair finally folded his hands together. Effective immediately, he said, All identified transactions will be subject to independent review. Nobody reacted. They already knew what was coming. Several executive authorities are being suspended pending investigation. A legal advisor began distributing folders around the table. Michael looked inside his and went completely silent. Two department heads lowered their eyes. Daniel remained motionless. Years of confidence evaporated in less than 10 minutes. Not because someone attacked them, because reality arrived. Reality has a way of doing that. One by one, responsibilities were reassigned. Access privileges were frozen. Oversight measures were activated. Procedures I had not personally used in years suddenly came back to life exactly as they were designed to. Atlas Global had been built to survive difficult days. This was one of them. Amanda finally looked toward me. There were 100 questions in her eyes. Confusion, regret, disbelief. She opened her mouth once, then closed it again. What could she possibly say? The previous evening she had introduced me as an afterthought. 24 hours later, she was watching the company reorganize itself around decisions she never knew I could make. The irony was almost painful. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just disappointment. The board chair concluded the presentation and closed the final report. This process will continue over the coming weeks, he said. Further actions will be determined by the findings. Then he turned toward me. The room followed his gaze. Every eye settled in my direction. Waiting, expecting, wondering what I would say. I remained silent for several moments. Long enough for the tension to become uncomfortable. Then I stood. The city skyline stretched beyond the conference room windows. Morning sunlight reflected across glass towers and steel rooftops. Chicago looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. Yet inside this room, nothing would ever be the same again. I looked around the table once more and realized the hardest conversation of the day had not happened yet. The conference room remained silent after I stood. Not because anyone expected a speech. Because nobody knew which version of the story they were living in anymore. 24 hours earlier, most of the people in that room believed they understood exactly who I was. They had built an entire narrative around a man they never bothered to know. A husband standing quietly in the background. A forgotten figure attached to someone else's success. Now the illusion was gone. The truth sat in the middle of the table, impossible to ignore. I looked toward Daniel first. Years of authority had vanished from his expression. In its place was the exhaustion that comes from realizing every decision eventually creates a bill that must be paid. Then I looked toward Michael. The confidence that had filled the ballroom the previous night had disappeared completely. Sometimes people mistake position for power. They assume titles create importance. They forget that respect and authority are not always the same thing. Finally, my eyes settled on Amanda. Of everyone in the room, she looked the most lost. Not because of the investigation. Not because of the board. Because she was confronting a much simpler truth. She had stopped seeing the person standing directly in front of her. Looking back, I realized our marriage had not broken in a single moment. Not during the gala. Not during the meeting. Not because of one careless joke. It broke gradually through hundreds of small choices. Every time respect was replaced with assumption. Every time listening was replaced with judgment. Every time success became more important than gratitude. The board members began gathering their documents. Legal advisors prepared follow-up meetings. Executives quietly left the room one by one. Nobody argued. Nobody protested. Reality had already spoken. Within 20 minutes, only Amanda and I remained near the conference table. The city stretched behind us through 42 floors of glass and steel. Morning traffic moved through the streets below like nothing had happened. Amanda finally broke the silence. Why did you never tell me? Her voice was quiet, fragile. I considered the question carefully. I did, I said. She frowned. No, you did not. I nodded slowly. I told you every time I asked you to trust me. Every time I asked you to value people more than titles. Every time I reminded you that success is not the same as character. Tears formed in her eyes, but I kept my voice calm. Not cold, just honest. You stopped listening a long time ago. The words hung between us. Painful because they were true. Amanda looked away toward the skyline. Can we fix this? She asked. It was the question I had expected. The question she should have asked years earlier. I took a slow breath. Some things in life deserve second chances. Others become lessons. You did not lose me this morning, I said quietly. You lost me the day you stopped respecting me. She closed her eyes. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument ever could. A few weeks later, the independent review expanded. Leadership changes followed. New safeguards were implemented. Atlas Global survived because it had been built to survive difficult days. Good companies do not depend on a single person. They depend on principles that outlast personalities. As for Amanda and me, our paths eventually separated. Not with anger, not with revenge, just acceptance. Some chapters end because they are supposed to. A year later, I found myself standing on the same executive floor watching a new generation of leaders build something stronger than what came before. The company recovered. The culture improved. Trust returned. Looking out over the city, I realized something important. Success is not measured by how many people admire you when you are winning. It is measured by who still respects you when nobody knows your name. If there is one lesson I carried from that experience, it is this: never underestimate the quiet person in the room. Sometimes they are simply listening. Sometimes they are learning. And sometimes they are the reason the room exists in the first place. What do you think? Was Amanda a victim of ambition, or did she make choices that led her exactly where she ended up? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this remind you how important respect, loyalty, and character truly are, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next story.